and welcome to World Travel Market's Business Day and our new Talk Business series, which will offer you some top advice and fresh ideas from some of Europe's leading business executives. My name is Micaela Juarez. I'm Head of Communications for World Travel Market. There is going to be very little talk from me, just an emphasis on hearing as much as possible from our guest business supremos. It's my great pleasure to introduce three very different captains of the industry from very different businesses. We've put together a lineup which not only focuses on the best in travel and tourism, but also other sectors outside the industry, with the aim of bringing you a completely different perspective on maintaining competitive edge in tough climates. In the last 15 minutes of each of our sessions, it'll be over to you to ask the questions. Time for you to seek advice you want for your own businesses. Our first speaker needs very little introduction, as she is very well known and respected in the industry. Here is World Travel Market's aviation advisor, John Strickland, to tell you more. John.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Michaela said, we've got a great speaker for you from the airline business today. And the airline we're going to be talking about 16 years ago was brand new and advertised itself as the airline which proposed flights cheaper than a pair of jeans. We were just talking before we came along here today that probably the price of a pair of jeans has gone up, but the lowest fares available on the airline in question, easyJet, are probably still available at leading levels at the same as they were 16 years ago. Now, when that airline began, and of course it was founded by Stelios Hadjiioannou, the serial entrepreneur, it not only made claims about its pricing, but it actually didn't have its own aircraft to fly. It had two planes it rented from another company. It didn't even have its own operating license. 16 years later, it trips off the tongue of consumers all over Europe. It's a very different airline to what it was in the beginning, extremely successful. And 2.5 years ago, we saw a new CEO come to the helm to manage that company through a very significant period of change and actually some pretty challenging, difficult periods. So I'd like to welcome to the stage now Carolyn McCall OBE. Welcome, Carolyn. I think it's your first time at the WTM, I think, isn't it, today?
Yeah.
You were looking over brochures as you came in and wondering where else easyJet could fly to that you don't already serve. I just want to start off on the business aspects of your own career, Carolyn, because when it was rumoured in the press that you were going to join easyJet and indeed then confirmed that you were to be the new CEO, there was a lot of scepticism at how on earth can somebody come in from such a different background, and your world was the media world with Guardian Media. You've been here 2.5 years, and as I mentioned, it's been a very challenging period, but you're going to announce some pretty stunning financial results, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. I know it's something we can't talk about a lot today because it's a closed financial period, but we'll touch on as far as we can in a moment. But you've survived 2.5 years, and you and the company have flourished. Tell us, first of all, Carolyn, when you were, first of all, thinking about the job, and then when you started it, how have you found running an airline to be different to your previous life in the media world?
Okay, I mean, I think there's much made of the difference between media and aviation. And actually, they're both in areas of quite a lot of structural change, and they're having to change as a result of that. And there's a lot of disruption in both, when I say disruption, I mean in media it's digital disruption, which is changing the model, whereas in aviation it's just everyone's having to rethink the established models. Is that all right on sound? Yeah. I think that all of that, the change and the managing all of that, and the fact that it's pretty relentless, it's 24/7 in media, it's also highly operational. I think people don't realize that media is a manufacturing business, actually. You know, you're producing things, you're manufacturing, you have print plants, printers, etc. I think stood me in very good stead for what I'm doing today. Of course, there are other factors in aviation that you have to deal with, like the external factors that, you know, there are so many variables that can affect an airline. And that's something that I think you have to just adapt to quite quickly.
Well, you mentioned that both media and airlines are very operational. In fact, the first year, in fact, the first summer period, I think, of you being in office, there were even, I think, adverts. I think it may have been your competitor, Ryanair, I think, ran an advert comparing easyJet's punctuality to being worse than Air Zimbabwe. So it was a very difficult summer.
Yes, it was.
Flights were delayed and cancelled.
Yes.
I remember speaking to you before. You said, actually, the irony is now that was a very formative part of your joining the industry.
It was really. I mean, I think my first 6 months was, there were, some real operational issues. And actually, the Sunday Times won an award for running a piece about Air Zimbabwe's OTP compared to easyJet, which, was not funny at all at the time. We also had the aftermath of the volcano, so we're still dealing with millions of claims. We also had the fuel spike in my first 6 months, which just went through the roof in January. And we had the worst winter weather in, I think, 40 years. So I think as a CEO of an airline, I dealt with, one of the other CEOs of another airline pointed out to me that I'd probably dealt with events that most CEOs don't have to deal with, sometimes ever, but actually certainly in their first 3 years of being a CEO. So, and I think that was extremely important to me because it just got me completely into the deep end. And I had to understand the operation extremely well very early on. And actually the ops team could not kind of tell me everything was fine and not to worry about it and keep me out of it. In fact, I was very, very stuck into it. And I think that's been very important to me.
Because that must have been quite a challenge, because I know myself from airline cultures, many of the operational staff can be pretty hard-bitten. They can be sceptical of anybody coming in from outside, least of all somebody from another industry, and to boot, a woman CEO. Yeah. So you actually did persist with that.
I know. Well, I mean, the thing is, I did talk about passengers quite a lot, which was a bit of a culture shock for some people in ops.
Right.
But actually, I think they realised that what I could do was help them. And that was really important early on. And no, actually, honestly, there was no real resistance to that. And it's a fantastic ops team with the best OTP in the industry now.
Yeah, the punctuality is pretty stunning when you think of all.
It's fantastic. It's 88% OTP, for the year. So it's very, very strong, and I think everyone believes in that now because it's a very aligned goal for the airline.
I mean, you mentioned the media world from whence you came. That's been through a lot of changes in terms of technology and so on over the years. Digital media, of course, today. But I just wonder, as someone who's spent his whole working life in the airline business, do you think the airline industry makes too much of the difficulties of the crises that it faces, or do you think that's just par for the course and the industry has to get on and deal with that?
I'm afraid I think it's just the industry. I mean, I don't think there's any point complaining about the external factors or the shocks that airlines experience. Other industries have other factors going on for them. I just think you have to get on with it. You have to manage it. I mean, the only thing you can do with an external shock like the volcano, which no one would have had in any risk analysis or risk map that they'd ever done, is to be as prepared as you can be and to recover as quickly as you can and to keep the passenger in mind. And it's not a time to be, the low-cost operating model is absolutely fundamental to what we do. But actually, when you're recovering passengers, it's not the time to think about that cost. It's the time to think about how you deal with the passengers, because that's the way they'll come back to you. Because if you look after them, that's how they'll come back. So I think you just get on with it, when you have a crisis. And there's no point saying, oh, goodness, it's the worst winter in 40 years, or it's the worst this or the worst that. Because actually, every year there's something. So you just have to build that into your planning, try and have some contingency, and then manage it extremely well.
Thinking again of the fact you've been able to bring external perspective to the role and therefore to the business. I think if I remember rightly, I've seen you quoted before as talking about these definitions we have in the industry, and you mentioned there low-cost airline, and I think you said something along the lines of passengers don't talk about I want to go on a low-cost airline, I want to go on a legacy carrier. Just using that technical label of low-cost carrier, Ryanair and yourselves are seen, they're often quoted as different versions of low cost, but you have very different approaches to business. Ryanair more the bargain basement and secondary airports, yourselves focusing more on business travellers, which we'll come back to. But just give it a bit more of your own view about these labels, and how is it that two such different businesses are performing so well?
I think it is absolutely true to say that we are very, very different business models and equally successful, actually, at what we do. the big thing for easyJet was really differentiating its position in the market when you had such a clear brand as Ryanair. And then I think most people knew what the legacy carriers were about, because that's all they had ever experienced over 60 years. So I think for easyJet it was very, very important to define what it does and what it does really well. So when I talk about the labels, that's really from a consumer perspective. That's not to say consumers don't look for low fares. So our low-cost operating model is absolutely critical. It's something that is an internal ambition. You know, it's an internal way of working, because we know that without that, we couldn't offer low fares. Then what you add on to that is we fly to primary airports, not airports where people have to travel 2 hours to get to the city. So that's a big difference in our model with Ryanair. We fly to primary airports, and therefore we have to recover some of the costs of flying to those airports in yield. So that's a very different model. So when we decide where we're going to base aircraft, we take into account a lot of factors, which is about the market, the propensity to fly, the yield in the market, the competitive context, all of those things. Whereas I think Ryanair will often go into a market that no one's ever heard of the airport, and they will just go, if the price is right, we'll open up, and actually if it doesn't work for us, we'll move on. Whereas when we base aircraft in an airport, one of the reasons the airports work with us very well is they see us as a long-term partner. So it doesn't mean we're easy to negotiate with, as you were pointing out to me earlier on. We're very, very difficult to negotiate with. But they know once we're in, we will drive a lot of traffic, and that we're serious for the long term.
But equally, having said that, hear what you're saying about the long term, but you're just coming out of Madrid. I mean, not completely in terms of flying there, but you've had a base fare, I think about 8 aircraft. You're going to move those aircraft out. And just trying to tie this into two questions to you. Another aspect of what you've had to manage is, you could say, quite tough shareholder relationships. You've got shareholders, I mentioned that the founder of the company, those shareholders, or certain of them in particular, are putting a focus on dividend and return to them. If we look at the need to drive shareholder dividends, to drive profitability, then long term is fine, but it's got to be profitable, and those aircraft are expensive assets.
Yes, absolutely right. I mean, I think that's why we take a lot of care about our basing decisions, because we want them to be long term, and they generally are. And Madrid is a good example of somewhere we went into 5 years ago. The market was very different. There wasn't a crisis. Spain was not in the economic difficulty it is now. But if you add together all the factors in Spain now, there was no measure that you could say we should be basing aircraft in Spain. And one of the most important things there is Spain is an inbound market. So, you know, you look at it and you say 80% of your traffic is coming in. It's not an outbound market, which is most of our markets are very strong outbound markets as well. And then you add in the AENA, the airport charges going absolutely through the roof. And then you add the fact that the Spanish economy is very, very weak. I mean, AENA's charges doubled in 2 years. That was massive. So you put all of those things together, and actually you just had a very ugly picture. So it was a very easy economic decision, because we will still be able to serve Spain very, very well. We will still bring in and out of Spain 12 million passengers. But because it's an inbound market, we can do that in many other ways by basing aircraft elsewhere. And those assets, those aircraft, are going to be far more profitable based in other bases than if we kept them in Madrid. So that was the decision. And
just while we're touching on Spain, we've just had hot news even in the last 24 hours that IAG, the parent group of British Airways and Iberia, is looking to buy their associate company Vueling, which itself is termed as a low-cost company. Can you see the sense in that? Do you think that may happen?
I can see the sense in that for IAG, yes, definitely, because I think IAG is, is restructuring and is having to bring its costs down quite significantly, and has got quite a lot of issues around crew costs. And I think Vueling is an important way of having a different cost base.
And again, in terms of competition, you mentioned, Madrid is an example of an airport where you've reduced, or you are reducing capacity. I think your biggest airport of operation is here in London, at London Gatwick Airport. And we had Stuart Wingate, the CEO of Gatwick, on a panel yesterday. But you're facing more challenges there. We've just heard of another low-cost labelled airline, Norwegian, coming into Gatwick. They fly there already from Scandinavia, but they are going to set up a base, I think, for one of the first bases outside of Scandinavia that they've operated.
Yeah.
Does that seem to make sense to you? Are you worried about that your preeminent position there could be challenged by this Viking invader?
Okay, so we love competition, and we're a child of competition. We were born by the EU, who deregulated the market, so it allowed us to compete with everybody. And so I think competition is good. It's good for consumers. It's good for Gatwick. That doesn't mean in any way we'll be complacent. They will have, I think, 2 or 3 aircraft there. We have about 50. That's 50, not 15. So, we are strong in Gatwick, and we will make every effort to make sure consumers know that we will be the lowest fare on every route we fly, and that we are a great airline to fly because we look after our passengers. So I think that cause of making it easy and affordable for passengers is very, very strong, and particularly in the UK. This is where we started. So no complacency. We will watch every single thing they do in Gatwick or elsewhere as well, but Gatwick in particular. But we'll compete, and we'll compete hard.
And in terms of opportunities for you, I mentioned in my introduction how the easyJet we see today is very different from when it began with these 2 rented aircraft, and it was flying out of airports such as London Luton and Liverpool as its major operations to a degree secondary. They're both still on the network.
Very much still in the network.
Who would have imagined, 16 years later, that you would be in a Civil Aviation Authority scarce capacity hearing pitching to get rights to Moscow, which you've just won.
I know.
Tell us about this evolution in looking at different markets. Moscow's not in the EU. I'm sure there's a lot of complexities. What made you decide to do that? How did you convince the CA that you were indeed the right airline to come in and operate on that route?
Well, I think that the story of easyJet has been about evolution. I think the fundamental model is actually the same. Whether you layer in the Moscow, the Linate Fiumicino, all of these decisions that have been taken, which I think will be very good for consumers as well as for the airline, they've all come kind of in a kind of, it's been an evolution really of easyJet. So the Moscow thing was very interesting because I think a lot of people just didn't believe we would get that, and I think it shows that easyJet has come of age. I don't think we are establishment in any way. I think we're still very much a challenger brand because I think those low fares are still so important. So we are constantly challenging airports to do business our way instead of the traditional legacy carrier way. We're constantly challenging governments to think differently about how they preferably don't tax consumers with APD, which is a big challenge. We're constantly challenging. And so I think people thought, well, London-Moscow is a very established, traditional business route, and it is. I'd say over half the passengers on that route will be business passengers. So I think if the CAA didn't believe, 1, that we were that strong in Gatwick, that we could really make it work from Gatwick, and 2, that we couldn't service business passengers effectively on that flight, they would not have awarded that to easyJet. So I think it is actually a culmination of the network being very, very strong, of the credibility of easyJet within regulators and government and officials being strong and being taken seriously, that resulted in us winning that route.
Okay. Now, you touched there, Carolyn, on some of the challenges, for example, taxation, the air passenger duty here in the UK. Yeah. I'd just like to link that in with the issue of capacity. Of course, we know there's a lot of discussion going on here in the UK, perhaps too much discussion and not enough action about runway capacity. Again, perhaps thinking from a point of view of yourself as an industry leader, but particularly the fact you've come from an industry that is, by its essence, communication. I often wonder, we're hearing so many voices coming from the industry, be they airports or airlines, in this discussion with government about taxation, about runway capacity. And I just wonder, is it becoming so much noise and so much scattershot approach and so much of a partisan attempt to communicate that when we hear that politicians such as Justine Greening, who granted is not in post, say, well, it's a pub-style debate. With your communications heritage, do you think the industry could do better? And is that something you're actively working with easyJet to get a message across which acknowledges differences, but cuts the sway through and makes progress with politicians?
I think to be fair to the airlines, on APD, we were absolutely united.
There was a big change there.
Totally.
To see you walking with Michael O'Leary or Willie Walsh was...
Willie, Steve Ridgway, Michael O'Leary and myself were, and other airlines too, but the four of us were fronting that for the airlines, saying that if you don't listen, this is going to suppress demand, and there's no point saying you get a load of money in, because actually you're losing a lot of money by not really rethinking how you do this. And we asked jointly for, and that work is still continuing, and it is continuing with all the airlines. So we are completely united about that. I think also on capacity, if you spoke to the airlines, you'd get a fairly united response actually, which I think everybody sees that the Southeast has got some capacity issues. I think BA will have a different view. They like focusing on Heathrow for obvious reasons, but actually generally you would say there's an overemphasis on the hub. There's not enough emphasis on Southeast capacity. And I think the Davis Commission is a good thing. You're right. I mean, there have been a number of committees set up, a lot of talking. I think now the Davis Commission really has to say what it's going to deliver. This country needs a 20 to 50 year roadmap for transport, where aviation is a very important part. It needs to be integrated with other transport links. And that's what we've been lacking for a long, long time. And I think I contrast that with what happens with other airports and governments and regulators. If I spend, Schiphol, or Charles de Gaulle, ADP, they are so aligned about, how they're going and what they're doing in the investment plans, which are 20, 30 years, fruition, if you like. But they are very aligned as countries around what they want for their main hub or their main port. And I think we are really different. It's quite a stark contrast, really, for us. So I think we need to get our act together on that.
Okay, just coming back to your own business model, Carolyn, this evolution that's taking place. We hear a lot about easyJet focusing more on the business traveller. You recently rolled out across your network seat assignment rather than, you could say, the scrum at the gate, which perhaps easyJet and other carriers have participated on in the past, changing fare structures, taking, in some ways, the territory of, to use one of these labels, the legacy carriers, the BAs or the Air Frances of this world. How is that going? Are you going to do more of that? And
okay, so the first...
is it going to risk this focus on cost that you mentioned?
The first misconception is that we're changing anything. We're not changing anything with the model. So it would be a misconception to say that anything about the model is changing. So our model is based on high asset utilization, high load factors, point to point, OTP and turn, high OTP and high turn. So our turn time is absolutely critical. So on allocated seating, the actual decision maker about that, the ultimate sign-off for allocated seating was the ops director. Because had our chief operations officer said to me that he did not believe he could do the turn times and the OTP and do allocated seating and roll it out, we would not be doing it. So we know it will make all our passengers happy, and we know that there might be some upside on revenue over and above speedy boarding, but we would have still not done it if it would have affected the model. And so those are two really important parts of the model. So we believe we can do that as a low-cost operating model and do it really well and continue to deliver. And I think the business traveller is also very important on this, because we already had about 16, 17% of our passengers travelling on business, because we fly to primary airports and we're efficient and we're quick. And all we're doing is we're now looking at ways of expanding and growing and developing that by working very closely with travel management companies, by working more closely in an easyJet way with the GDS, the global distribution suppliers. We're not changing the model. So it's kind of building on what we already do, but really focusing on it and doing it a bit differently. So I think that's quite important.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one element you mentioned there, these GDSs, the global distribution systems, they in some ways are, for the traditional airlines, the Frankenstein's monster, invented by airlines, in many ways given to airlines to get them to book on their services, and then suddenly they find it turns around and bites them, charging fat fees. And we hear about glamorous offices of GDSs down in the hinterland of Nice and so on. So you actually managing to work with them and not suddenly find the invoices arriving on your desk for passenger fees.
Yeah, as you know, our discussions with GDS are very different to the traditional discussions that would have been had. And we are not on full GDS. We will make it easy for TMCs to book easyJet, and we're very serious about doing direct deals with companies. But what we will not do, I mean, actually, I think that world is changing. You know, technology is developing. And it will be interesting to see in 3 years, John, whether actually the technology moves more towards us in terms of software, rather than these great big legacy systems that you get in GDS. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think jury's out on that for me.
And another bit of news we had this week, it took me by surprise, was that you're going to tie up in frequent flyer terms of Emirates. And this industry loves rumours. I'm sure there are some people in the room who might rumour now, is this going to become something bigger? We heard about Emirates tying up with Qantas.
Again,
are you about to be swallowed up by Emirates?
You're hearing it from me, right, okay? So this is what is happening. The deal with Emirates is a commercial redemption deal. So it's exactly like the Nectar deal we did 2 years ago. It is about Emirates flyers being able to use their points to buy tickets on easyJet, which Emirates will pay us for. That's all it is. There is no code sharing, interlining, co-branding. There's none of that. It's
not a new Emirates Qantas deal.
No. It is a very simple, straightforward redemption scheme. And you know, Emirates have got a lot of flyers that come into Europe, and therefore they will be able to redeem their points with easyJet flying within Europe. That's it.
One last question for me, Caroline, before we go to the floor. You've flown, well now you fly, I think it's 100% Airbus fleet. easyJet started off with Boeing. You've said publicly you're evaluating next generation aircraft. Yeah. Can you tell us any more about that at this point in time?
Not really too much. I mean,
right.
I can only say that we have done a very thorough technical evaluation of both Boeing, Airbus and Bombardier. And also with the engine manufacturers, CFM and Pratt & Whitney. We're in the process of commercially evaluating that. So we've had an RFP out, and we will be taking some steps on that in the next 6 months or so. But that's it really, because it's all in train.
Okay, so watch the space.
Watch the space.
Let's go to the floor. I'm sure we're going to have many eager people to put questions to you. We've got, first one here, we've got Malcolm on the front. We've got a microphone just coming your way, Malcolm.
Colin, I'm a little bit out of touch. First of all, can you...
Sorry, could you just introduce yourself?
I'm so sorry. Malcolm Ginsberg, Business Travel News. First question, can you quickly tell us when the seating allocation thing will be rolled out completely, so that at least we know? That's one. I also, on the question of APD, your customers from going to Scotland and back obviously have to pay twice, and I don't know what this Scottish man has to say about that. But I also believe that something happened in Northern Ireland now, which means that you don't pay tax on Northern Ireland. So that means that a English or British mainland person can fly to Belfast, pays his £13, and doesn't pay £13 to come back. I'm not sure. Could you explain?
So let me I'll take the APD question first and get on to allocated seating. So you're absolutely right to say that if you are flying to and from Scotland, your tax could possibly exceed your fare. It will exceed your ticket price, actually, sometimes. So it's very expensive. I can tell you that Scottish ministers do not want that. So they are, I would say they are not in favour of APD, because Scotland needs aviation. They need to fly to virtually anywhere. So, well, I don't want to be drawn on that, but if you were to talk to...
Scottish ministers in London?
No, in Scotland. So I think that they see the harm at first, at close hand, of that, because it really does affect Scotland. You're not right, Malcolm, about Northern Ireland. It's not Britain, it's the Republic of Ireland that is now not having, the Irish government have waived APD. So it's the Republic that don't pay APD. So you can fly to Dublin and not have to pay APD on the way back. Paul? And it's also, it's long haul.
Yeah, long haul from the new year is going to be zero APD.
Not short haul. Yeah. For long haul. For short haul, it's the same. Yeah.
Did you do the allocated seating?
Allocated seating. So we're rolling it out at the moment, so you won't be surprised that some of your flights will be allocated and some of them won't be at the moment. by the end of November, we'll have rolled out the whole of the network.
Okay. Question from the gentleman at the back. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Mike. Hi, Simon Ferguson, Managing Director of Travelport in the UK.
Hello.
Hi, Carolyn. John, I'd just like to set the record straight. Travelport's global headquarters are in Langley, near Slough. Nothing glamorous about those GDS headquarters, as Carolyn.
Is it Amadeus who's down in Sophia Antipolis?
Allegedly so, yes. But nothing glamorous about our headquarters, as Carolyn will testify.
I will testify.
I'd also just like to comment that, just to follow on from the point you made, absolutely, we are committed to the type of API-based fare distribution, both for low-cost carriers like easyJet and for scheduled airlines that Carolyn referred to. We've made a lot of strides with easyJet and with some of the other scheduled airlines over the last 18 months in particular. My question, though, Carolyn, is related to ancillaries, actually, and typically low-cost carriers have a much higher percentage of their revenues in ancillaries than scheduled or legacy carriers. How far do you see the easyJet brand going in terms of being able to retail hotel rooms, excursions, anything? How far do you see yourself becoming a generic travel brand, in a sense, as opposed to a carrier with some ancillaries on the side?
Okay, and actually thanks for saying that, because actually Travelport was in my mind when I was talking about technological advances, because I think, you know, we've had some very good meetings with your firm. I would say on ancillaries, it depends on what you mean by ancillaries. So we separate it now into seat revenue and non-seat revenue. So anything to do with the price that affects the seat, which is speedy boarding or premium reserve seating or bags or anything to do with that, we call seat revenue. And then we now manage separately our true ancillary revenue, which is not dependent on that seat price. And I think a lot of that, I think the easyJet brand is very powerful. We have easyJet Holidays, for instance, and that's doing fine. But you know, every time you get into that, you kind of think to yourself, we make a lot of profit from our core business, and we know there's still a lot to go. So it's not to say that we're not focused on ancillary and in, you know, conversions into hotels, cars, insurance, etc., etc. It is to say, though, that even small gains on our core product make significant amounts of profit in a way that ancillaries can take a long time to develop. So it's just about how we put our resources. So we're serious about it. We think that there is more we can do, but it's about the time we spend doing it compared to the time we spend on, say, our RMS system or network optimization, our revenue management system or network optimization. We can get so much more benefit from focusing resources on those things than actually putting an over amount of emphasis on smaller pockets of profit.
Okay, another question from the front, two in the front, second to front row.
Hi, I'm Judy O'Sullivan, Marketing
Just hold your mic a
Executive.
little closer, just a bit closer.
A little, okay, that's better. I'm Judy O'Sullivan, Marketing Executive for Jetaway Traveling Jamaica. I'm doing a question, 2 parts. I want to find out how is it that you handle act of gods. You mentioned the volcano and some other storms, snowstorms, etc. Reason I'm asking you, I have been selling easyJet for more than 8 years. We do not get commission because you're an online thing and there's nothing set up for us in the Caribbean with you. But traveling to these shows, I took back the information to my office. So we are able to sell you, but sometimes we charge a customer because we do it online. Sometimes we just book it. My experience for this trip, we flew in on Delta from Mobay. Hurricane Sandy hit the United States.
Yeah.
We booked easyJet from Schiphol to here.
Yeah.
Delta, of course, with the hurricane, delayed the flight. So we had no choice but to wait in Atlanta until we could get get to
Just want to
Schiphol.
give Carolyn a chance to give you the answer because there's a few more people asking for questions. We haven't got a lot of time, so we'll just come to the core of what you've had.
Yeah, but I need some help.
We've had a delay, and Carolyn's got to answer you about acts of God and the impact, how you handle those.
Yes, but I need some help too because.
Can you just give it as brief as possible, if you don't mind?
Okay,
Thanks.
sure. I'm sorry about that. I need your help. When we got to Schiphol, we couldn't. Everything was out for us, so I need your help there. So if we could speak after, because I know you're running with time.
We'll pick up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I've had another gentleman on the front. There's another gentleman here.
Good afternoon. My name is James. I'm from a company called Visit Rentals. This is a sort of general question regarding sort of Norwegian and also the Scandinavian market. With sort of Norway and Sweden being quite strong traditional business markets and also quite lucrative for people like Ryanair flying into Torp and back and forth to London. And with sort of Norwegian expanding, obviously in the UK, do you have any plans to have a sort of further presence in perhaps Norway or Sweden?
We have no plans at the moment. We think what's happening in Norway and Sweden is very interesting. You've got SAS with quite a lot of trouble, debt, restructuring. Norwegian with a large aircraft order, putting a lot of planes into its own market as well as other markets. There's quite a big battle there going on, and it's not one we want to enter right now. We want to put our resources where we know we will get the returns. As John pointed out, you know, our shareholders are looking for, I think all shareholders actually, it'd be interesting to see if Martin Glenn says this as well. All shareholders have shifted quite dramatically because of the Eurozone crisis into more immediate returns, and we know where we can get our returns, and Scandinavia is not that place at the moment.
Great. Next question, gentleman on the front.
Hello? There you go. Hi, I'm Dominic George. I'm a recent aviation graduate and a marketing director and development manager for Global Connect TMC I run. A quick question with regards to the transparent fares ruling. How do you believe that is potentially going to, or do you believe it's going to affect easyJet's market position?
No, I don't. And we worked very much with, we did a lot of trialing and testing on transparency, and we were very happy to move. And all we were saying to regulators was everyone needs to move into wrapping so that you see the headline price that you buy. That was our only issue. We were not worried about wrapping at all because we believe our low fares are genuinely low fares. And actually, you know, we've tested it, we've trialed it, we're running live now, and it's fine. It's good for us. It's good for us.
Okay. Gentleman back here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sir Roy Piercy, Chairman and Chief Executive of a company called Grey Matter Marketing. I'd like to address, or if I may, my question on the basis of thinking about the customer. I'm going to EIBTA. For a variety of reasons, I decided I would actually try easyJet, which I had not used for 3 years. So we went online, did all the usual things. When the confirmation came back, it was Southend to Barcelona, Barcelona to get to Stansted. No question, no explanation, no nothing. We tried to get in touch with you through the call center number, which apparently is no longer in use, but it's on your website and your response. We tried to get in touch with you via email, and the only address we had was a no reply. And suddenly a company called eDreams pops up, and they say they can't change it, and I'd never heard of them, no idea what they were supposed to be in the net for. They couldn't do anything. We'd have to talk to easyJet. We did eventually get in touch with easyJet to be told there's nothing they could do. You'll have to buy a ticket.
So we've only got 5 minutes left on the session.
I know where you're going. Can I just say, I think you booked through eDreams, so you booked through another part. I don't understand. If you just see me afterwards, I would really like to understand that, because that's a very, very unusual complaint. And I think it's because you booked through a third party that you're not getting direct access to us. So you should, and also the number on the website definitely works, definitely. So we need to pick it up. We'll pick it up with you, and we'll sort that out.
Right, gentleman down here. That's right.
Hi, and Carlos Mora from Tremendavia. Only just 2 small questions. Are you going to fly to La Palma, and are you going to open more routes in the Canaries?
Are we going to fly to Palma?
La Palma, SPC.
I can't answer that at the moment because I don't know.
La Palma is in the west of the Canary Islands.
I know where it is, but I can't really, I don't know is the answer to that. And then are we going to open more routes to?
To the Canaries.
To the Canaries. Yes, we are looking actually at where we fly from to the Canaries and, so other network points and linking it with the Canaries. So we are looking at that.
Yeah. Two rows ahead, and then a gentleman on the front row.
Hi, Carolyn and John. This is Alex Thomas from Airline Business and Flight Global. I just wanted to ask a few more questions about Moscow. You say that easyJet is very committed to its low fares model, but the Russian market is obviously very different. What flexibility will be required to fly to Moscow in particular, please?
When you mean flexibility, what exactly do you mean?
Do you mean operational or commercial?
I mean, in terms of the fact that ticket sales over there, I mean, then they're not going to be online so much. Will you be looking at selling them through travel agents, turnaround times?
I've got it. Okay, I've got it. So we are working currently with Transaero, so I can't say very much about that because it's a commercial agreement and it is in process at the moment. So we're very mindful of the differences of Moscow, and we are currently, so we have done a lot of work on this before we went for the route. Maybe no one expected us to win, but some of us expected that we would win. So we've done quite a lot of preparation. You are right to point out that Moscow is a very different market to the ones we generally operate in, but it is a market that other low-cost operators fly into from other places. So Welling fly in, Norwegian fly in. So we will be using all the intelligence out there, and we will be working with people in Moscow to make sure that we get it right.
Gentleman on the front row.
Patrick White, Travel Trade Gazette.
Can't hear you. Yeah.
Patrick White, Travel Trade Gazette.
Hello.
Hi, you signed a deal with Thomas Cook earlier this year to provide seats on your planes for Thomas Cook customers. Are we likely to see that deal kind of be extended maybe over the following years, or maybe types of deals like this as well?
It's not the first time we've done that. It is, I think, innovative in that it's a response to a problem in the industry, which is charter operators, but it is actually a good deal for both parties. So I think it really does depend on the operators, because we have very clear framework within which we will do a series seat deal, which is what that is, it's a series seat deal. And we will have very kind of minimal hurdles that we have to have in order to get our returns and our seats. And if that's acceptable, then we'll do more. And if it's not acceptable, we won't do it. So simple.
Carolyn, we'll just take one last quick question because I know there's a session following us and you've got to escape. This gentleman here.
Thank you. My name's Derek Robbins from Bournemouth University. Thank you. Fascinating talk. And I noticed what you say about being low cost so critical to your business. Does easyJet have an attitude to the sort of really emerging area of biofuels at the moment? Because of course they have a premium charge that might not happen in the future, and the low cost model and the biofuels might conflict.
No, it's a really that's a really interesting, quite a good ending actually, because it's very future facing. What I would say is, when I say the low cost operating model, it is not about passengers. The passengers should not see that. They should see speed, efficiency, friendliness, warmth of service. That's what and low fares. That's what the passengers should see. It's my team that work on the low-cost model. Now, we actually have someone working on biofuels at the moment, talking to the people that supply it. But the key thing for us will be at what point does that achieve some critical mass and become quite an interesting thing to trial. And we are at the forefront, really, of innovation in terms of trialing things. So our Director of Engineering, Ian Davis, is the most fantastic person he will be into this already. And he's the one who's driven all of the avoid technology for ash, which helps us, really think about how we fly when there is an ash cloud. And we are very, very, new engines are all about the fuel efficiency that we will gain from that, because we are more fuel efficient than any other airline in Europe. And if you fly with easyJet, you're 22% less carbon footprint than any equivalent airline on the route we fly. So it's really important to us to stay ahead of that. And if biofuels is the thing, we will be interested. But it's a long way away, I fear.
Carolyn, as you said, a very good finishing point. I'm sure we could have detained you all day. I know you have to go off and do some preparation for these earlier mentioned financial results coming out in a couple of weeks' time. We look forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you, John.
More about your growth plans. Good luck with the Moscow launch.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carolyn McCall OBE, Chief Executive of easyJet.